Cat's effects has two different ways of handling resource management. Resources are those things that when you open them, you need to close them. So the most common example would be a file, but anything similar, like it could be a database, a socket, or anything that once you acquire it, you have to make sure you release it. If you don't release it, actually, in many cases, that can cause a problem. You run out of memory, or you run out of resources, right? You run out of file handles and so on. So this today we are going to look at the simpler version of this, because CATS actually has two mechanisms to deal with this CATS effects. One is called bracket, which is more flexible. Today we're going to look at a dumbed down, simpler version, which is probably going to be just fine in most situations. We don't need the flexibility in most situations. And then in another video, I'm going to look at the more complex scenario, which will give you more options in how you handle the closing logic and all of the details based on the outcome of processing or working with the resource. Okay, so this is called, this effect is called resource. Let's just, I put some notes here. Key takeaways are that okay, so resources make sure we can be certain a file or some other kind of similar resource that needs to be released is released after processing. Whether or not the processing was successful is basically a finally clause. So that's what it is. It's compared to a finally clause in other languages. We are creating an object that creates a resource which can open a buffer reader for a file and then close that file. That's our test case. We are printing out a message when we were finished reading from the file and when we close the resource to make sure we can confirm that the file is indeed closed after we're done processing. So this is just to make sure we can see what's happening and it's actually doing what we expect it to do. A limitation using this approach is a little limited because it does not allow complex conditional logic regarding how the resource is closed like bracket does. Resources are for simple use cases, but that is probably the vast majority of cases. Okay, so let's run this. So at the end, I have the usual run method, right? We know that how effects applications work. You write the code, and it's just really the descriptions of what needs to happen, and then there's a runner which runs the entire thing and it puts it all together and creates one big effect. Okay, so when I run this, it basically it opens a file. The file is a poem, and after opening the file, it just prints it out. First, I call it with the correct file, and then I call it with the incorrect file. Calling it with the incorrect file is just to show you guys what the error path is. Again, bracket is the one that allows complex processing based on the errors and processing results and all of that. But resource also allows you to deal with errors, so in a more limited way. Okay, so let's just run this to see what it does, and it should just print out the poem, right? Because I create a resource. I'm using the resource. So this is what you do. So once you have the resource, you say that use, and then you get what's inside the IO monad, right? The what we put inside the IO monad here, which is a buffer reader. You get the buffer reader, and then okay, so you get the reader, and then you do whatever you want with it. And the reason I have an IO here is because I have print lines, and in order to print anything out, I need the IO monad again for that as well. And similarly, this is when I call it with the incorrect file. Now another thing I did here was I have handle errors with, which is an error handling mechanism, and I need that there because in any kind of realistic scenario, because I want to give feedback to the user if there's an error happening. So this kind of shows how you can combine error handling with resource management. If you don't do this, then you don't have that nice feedback like what I have done here. This came out of the last run. So basically gives you a trail of what went wrong. So again, I will run this, and it prints out the poem. In the first case, it prints out the poem, right? It prints out the poem, and then it says closing the resource. So that's in the right order, right? I print out the poem. It does what it's supposed to do. It closes the resource. And in the second case, right, I have two cases in my run method. The first one is the correct file name, and the second one is the incorrect file name. And the incorrect file name just prints out the error. So that's exactly what we see down here. Obviously, if it couldn't open the file, it doesn't need to close the file. So this is how resource works. I hope this was useful to you guys. If you find this helpful, please subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.